So my alter ego is not too pleased with the last nightgown version I made, thinking it's way too lacy and frilly, in line with those old-fashioned Baroque ideas of ornamental beauty, and demands something with clean and simple lines instead. If you're new here, I'm on a journey of creating a whole wardrobe from scratch. You're very welcome to sew along. As usual, there are free drafting instructions for you to make it for your own measurements and your own preferences. And today I'm going to make another nightgown with different finishing methods, and I guess there's nothing that says clean and simple lines quite like spaghetti straps, so let's start with those. To make those, we need to cut 2 strips on bias, so in a 45-degree angle to the grain line of the fabric. A rotary cutter here is very helpful. We cut those on bias partly because bias edges don't fray really, but most importantly we want to take advantage of the bias stretchiness here, so make sure that you're not cutting into an already stretched fabric accidentally. And I cut them to be 2 centimeters wide. Pay attention to where the right side of your fabric is because it needs to be folded right sides together. See how stretchy it is, and we'll stitch it down to be turned inside out. My needle is set to the middle. First I close the stitch at the center, so about 5mm seam allowance. This will create a sort of funnel for later. And now I will continuously stretch my strap quite a bit and fold it as I go. And I shoot for the middle, for the center of the fold, to run along of this opening here at my machine's foot, which is about 3mm away from the needle. But once I'm not actively pulling on the strap and it's back in shape again, there will be a bit more room for the seam allowances when we turn it inside out. My thread here is knotted at both ends so that it's extra strong, and I stitch it onto the end of the strap and push my needle through the strap with the eye of the needle going forward. Once the needle is on the other side, I gently pull on it to start the whole turning over process. And you can get some scissors to help you push that thing in there. I kind of forgot that, so I'm just trying to sort of use my nails here instead. I'm really making it way too difficult for myself. There are also tools for that, by the way. I just hate to have too many random tools lying around. Oh, we got him. Okay, but I genuinely forgot how insanely annoying it is to make spaghetti straps out of cotton with silk, because it's so smooth, it very easily just glides through there. But we need to be patient and gentle until the end of the strap is on the other side. Because if that thread breaks, we would need to start again. Okay, the end is on the other side and I can actually grab it, and now no more gentle patience. And these are the fine, beautiful spaghetti straps. Sewing is so relaxing. I'm actually way too dramatic. It only took 10 minutes in real time. Anyway, I like to pin them onto my ironing board and steam them so that they are nice and even and stretched. I feel like the difficult part is out of the way. The bodice is exactly the same as for the other nightgown, but I cut it out 2 times because it's going to be lined. Clean lines, remember? I simply connected the bodice pieces onto each other with 1cm seam allowance, no need to finish those edges. The décolleté line is stay stitched, and I marked the center back and the center front here as well. Oh, and you also need to mark where the respective overlapping would end on the front pieces, but I forgot to do that. Okay, I can now pin the straps onto one of the back pieces upside down. The other bodice construction can be placed on top of it, and we can stitch them together at the top edge with 1cm seam allowance. The edges for the straps in the front need to stay open for now though, to determine the length for the straps. If you already know the length for your straps, you can stitch them to the front pieces as well, but I personally like to double check. The stay stitch is no longer needed, and here I left it open. So I will now turn it over and go ahead and check on my body what the right length for the straps would be. Okay, I pinned the right length here, and I will now pull it through the opening up to my marking. The straps can be stitched onto the front pieces at the edge here on the inside of the bodice. I made the spaghetti straps really long intentionally because we will need those later for the tunnel as well. You can decide which side you like least and make that your lining side, and you can go ahead and understitch it, so you won't be able to get over the peaks of the straps though, but you can fold it apart and press the seam allowance to your lining side and understitch it as far as you'll get it through on your machine, on the front pieces and on the back piece. I personally don't like to do that because I don't like the way it looks, so I press the bodice so that the right side slightly curves over onto the lining, and I set a pig stitch all along that edge, essentially setting tiny little dots to secure the lining in place so that this edge stays like that for a long time. This version is going to be a true wrap gown, so I decided for the skirt to be rectangle. It's going to be very simple. The length for me is 90 centimeters and I just cut it selvage to selvage so that all of this width can be distributed here. If you don't want this amount of volume in your skirt, you can also cut it to be a bit more narrow, of course, but working with the selvage here will save a few extra steps at the edges, and I think a bit more volume for the legs is just cozier for a nightgown. Now, if like me you struggle with cutting out a simple rectangle, you might consider the thread pulling method. For that, we are going to take advantage of the grain line of our textile, and this works both lengthwise and crosswise. You can cut into the fabric at your desired length or height and start pulling on one of those threads. And that will reveal a line, a marking where you'd need to cut for it to be a perfect rectangle in alignment to the grain line. If your thread breaks along the way, which will probably happen for a long cut like this one, you can cut up to where you're no longer able to see the marking and start pulling from there again. And you can just measure the length for your skirt on the selvage. As you can see, I cut back the fluffy stuff here, the selvage. It's going to sit directly at the edges of the bodice. So to make these edges a bit nicer, I will fold them to the wrong side and stitch down with 5mm seam allowance. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the 1cm seam allowances here at the edge of the bodice can be pressed toward the inside for now. We'll add a tunnel inside the lining later. Now, to distribute all of that here, we're going to ruffle the skirt, and I think it's important so that when it's overlapped, that it's not too busy here at the overlapping. So from the edge of the bodice up until the center front marking, the skirt should stay flat. So I just transfer these markings onto my skirt, and I also mark the middle of my rectangle. It will be the center back. And I will set 2 parallel stitches from the center front marking down to the other center front marking. For that I use a very long stitch, and the first one I set 5mm away from the edge. The second one is set 1cm away from the edge. And the reason I'm using 2 stitches is so that the ruching is a bit more contained and intentional and neat. The ends of these stitches need to stay open, and also don't cut them so that we are able to pull on them. We don't need the lining of the bodice for now, and I will first pin the center front markings onto each other. The center back markings, I also pin them onto each other. Now we can pull on these stitches. I don't know why exactly, but it's so insanely satisfying. I first ruche the left side and make sure that it fits this distance from center front to center back. And then I do the same on the right side too. I also want to add that I'm obviously very much into ruffles these days, but you can also take a simple rectangle like that and set a few very intentional pleats in the back instead, or even add one or a few triangular panels in the back. Most of these chemise dresses that inspired me here would be somewhat flat at the front and the sides, but will have volume in the back, almost implying a sort of gentle stride forward. I think it's such a beautiful silhouette too. Now that the volume is evenly distributed, I will baste it in place so that nothing gets stuck in the way. Oh, and there is one important thing that I forgot. For me to be able to tie the tunnel that will gather it all up, I need one of these ends from the strap here, and it needs to be secured onto the marking where the overlapping would end. You can pin it in place upside down in there. I'd like for the left side to be overlapped, but you can obviously choose the other side too. And you can of course use some decorative ribbon instead, but I will now stitch my skirt in place from one side to the other with 1cm seam allowance. The spot where the tunnel strap is attached to, I will set an additional stitch there just to make sure it's quite secure. I stitch so that the side of the bodice is facing me with all that ruching so that there are no accidental creases happening, while constantly checking that the ruching sort of points down and that nothing gets stuck. I can now take out the basting stitch, and I think it turned out lovely. The seam allowances now need to be pressed upwards and so that the seam is open before we proceed with the tunnel. Don't worry too much about the creases that might have happened. We can steam those out later. The important thing is that this seam is really open. And this is the last time you can double check the length of your straps, because now we're going to secure the lining in place. For that, with cotton, I prefer to just fold it in place with my fingers. With cotton that works really well. And I just gently stroke it down so that the top edge is nice and even, and fold it so that it sits slightly lower than the seam that connects bodice and skirt. This time I won't forget the other strap, pinning it onto the overlapping marking on the right side of the gown. I'd like to baste it all in place. I will however first pin the side seam onto each other and the center back markings and the other side seam. Oh no, how did that happen? I need cold water! Okay, crisis averted. I will now do it all again. On that note though, because it's quite relevant for nightwear, I find, once in a moon, similar stains might appear that even with thorough care, cold water or bleach can get a bit permanent. So I just want to add that dyeing it all black is always an option. Cotton obviously takes dye very easily. However, if you're stitching with polyester, you might need to get a special dye for that. But you know, there's always a solution. Anyway, I have basted it all in place, and the idea here is so that the fold is slightly lower than the seam. You can of course secure it by hand, but we can also stitch it down on the machine. On the right side, right into the shadow of the seam here. It will demand a bit more concentration though. So stitch slowly and sort of pull the seam open and also stretch it a bit towards you so that no creases appear on the other side. So not great, not terrible. I had to start anew in a few places where I didn't catch the seam allowance, but overall quite alright. The spot where the strap is attached, I stitched it down additionally. Now the tunnel itself is going to sit inside the lining. I will really push these seam allowances in there, and we can just set an additional stitch 1 centimeter away from the initial seam. I used the edge of my machine's foot for orientation and set my needle to the right. The basting stitch can be taken out now. You can use a ribbon to thread through the tunnel. You can also make a super long spaghetti strap. I'd like to use a sort of hybrid of an elastic and the leftover straps. I measured the length for the elastic on myself so that it's stretched but not too tight. I can stitch the straps to both ends now so that it would be the straps that peek out of the tunnel, and I use a narrow zigzag stitch for that. The ends of those straps, I cut them down and push them inside somewhat and secure them with a few hand stitches so that they won't fray. I will use a safety pin to pull it through the tunnel, and the thing is, an elastic offers a lot of comfort in terms of wearability, especially in sleepwear, especially when you're sleeping. For this particular version, it will also allow you to put on the nightgown without you having to tie it up constantly. However, as you probably know, when constantly washed, elastics are usually the first to go. So an open tunnel like that will give you the ability to replace it in case it stretches out, for example. I am sure you can think of many more creative options here. I think that will be the most comfortable, but you can also use a button and create a loop at one of the ends. But we're almost done. Do you like this version better? So I just tried it on. It turned out exactly as I imagined, so I'm happy. I double checked that the length is right. I will make it a bit longer than I usually would. I think a bit of length suits it. And I'm using the thread pulling method to get an even hem. I prefer to stitch these kind of hems twice and use my machine's foot for orientation. It just makes me a bit less nervous, I guess. I'm really not that good at even stitches. So I will stitch it down using my machine's foot for orientation with 5mm seam allowance. This is a wide stitch that can be taken out later if you want to. And then I use that exact edge to fold it over again and stitch very close to the edge. And it usually turns out much neater and more precise than if I were to simply fold it over twice and press it and stitch it down once. And that's the second version of the nightgown. I love how this one looks, so nice and clean on the inside too. The bodice with the lining is a bit more fiddly. I feel like the straps were the only truly annoying part, but those can be also ribbons. And overall, I think this version is pretty simple too, especially the skirt. I hope this inspires you to try it out. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for the updates and the pictures of your own projects too. It always warms my heart. I'm going to make another version of this nightgown, a sort of hybrid of these two with a slightly different skirt next. Bye!